Welcome to the YourTown television program. My name is Jeff Kline, and I'm your host for this MPS Foundation sponsored segment where we bring you interesting faculty and students and what they're doing on campus around your town. And right now, I'd like to welcome Dr. Eva Regnier. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff. It's nice to be here.
Now, before we get to talk about your unique contributions to MPS and why you're here and how you got here, we'd like to find out a little bit more about you. We have a solid reputation on the segment for bringing interesting people on it, and you're one of them. So tell me first, you did your undergraduate school work at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Are you from the Northeast, or why did you decide to go there?
I am from upstate New York, but
Okay.
I actually graduated high school in Fairfax County.
Oh, from the Virginia area. Yeah.
From the Virginia area. And I was not really sure what I wanted to do, but when I was looking at colleges, the students at MIT were very, very intense and interested in what they were doing and not partying quite as much as the folks at UVA, and so that's why I decided to go there.
Interesting. My rationale was exactly the opposite. I found the school that was doing the partying. No. So, but were you reared in Virginia then?
I went to 2 years of high school in Virginia, but
Okay.
before that I lived in upstate New York.
Oh, I see. Okay. So you went down to Virginia and then went back sort of Massachusetts a little bit further north. Well, great. And you studied environmental engineering science there. What does that entail?
Well, it's when I studied it, it was a lot about clean water, so chemicals that are in water and cleaning wastewater and things like that.
So it was like a branch of civil engineering?
It was in the civil engineering department, that's
Okay,
right.
right. And so that's a very important topic, particularly today. And you didn't go and continue your degree. You first went out to industry. So what did you do in industry?
Right, so I went to work as an environmental engineer, and I was hoping that that would really make the world a better place.
Sure, well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, that was my intention, and
Right.
it continues to be my intention. But we were cleaning up a lot of old messes. So we would build systems to clean up the water and the soil, but it did become a little repetitive cleaning up messes from the past. And so I started to think maybe we could try to stop making these messes instead of cleaning them up after the fact.
Right. Well, now, was this the company you worked for did this, or did you work for a municipality or a government organization?
I worked for corporations.
Okay.
In one of my jobs, I was actually a contractor for the EPA, and that, interestingly enough, led to my first experience going on a military base.
Oh, okay. Which one?
I went to a couple of them. Fort Bliss was one. So
Right.
we were making sure they were taking care of their oil storage and
Correctly.
following all the rules for that. And so-
Trying to keep the messes from being started. Right?
Exactly. That was trying to keep some of the messes from being started. So
Right.
yeah, and other bases that had other sorts of bad chemicals in the soil and needed to be cleaned up. So
Well, besides the cleanup part, which is hard, sometimes that's evacuation of soil, I know, and other things. But if you also studied water and water quality, did you look at unique systems in order to provide those water, any biosystems to provide that water quality?
you know, we didn't actually use biosystems in the companies that I worked for, although you know that did start to happen.
Right.
Did start to happen. But to be honest, a lot of the degradation of the chemicals was actually happening underground, and so to some extent the cleanup happened by waiting.
Just by way, see,
Or
well,
by-
that is right. I mean, sometimes that happens, you know.
Or by pumping in some extra oxygen, you know,
Right,
get those
to
bugs
allow
going.
it to go, and that's great.
Yeah.
Now, you worked for several years in this environment, and then you decided to go to Georgia Tech. Is that right?
I
So
did.
that's kind of a big jump from well, not really, from MIT to Georgia Tech, I guess. But what did you study there?
Well, I will say about Georgia Tech that it is an institute of technology, much like MIT. They're both
Right,
institutes
right.
of technology. I never went to any universities.
Oh, well, now wait a minute. I'm not sure. Is this a big bragging point? I just want
Well,
to
no, I just think it's funny, and MPS is also not
be really a big university.
and
Right.
so I've just sort of never been at a university. But
It's that party thing. it's lacking that
that's it.
party thing.
I mean, people partied at MIT and Georgia Tech, but they also were really
They're
serious
bounded.
about their work
Sure, no,
too.
absolutely, right.
But Georgia Tech had the #1 ranked industrial engineering program.
Right, and that's right downtown, isn't it, in Atlanta? Wow, was that a different experience for you?
Well, I've lived in a lot of cities.
Okay.
Monterey's sort of a small town, but Boston was a big city,
Sure.
and Washington, D.C., I worked in D.C., and so Atlanta was a great city, and it was really developing a lot at that time. It was after they'd had the Olympics, and Georgia Tech was building lots of buildings, and it was a pretty fun place to live, actually.
Now, did you go there on program, or did you know some of the faculty or people there before?
I connected with Georgia Tech through a chemical engineering professor.
Okay.
And so I did obviously go and visit and meet some of the faculty when I was deciding where to go to school. And so there I went. And what's great, and you know this really well, Jeff, is that when you study operations research and industrial engineering, you can do anything. You know, the tools apply.
Well, I like to think so.
Well, I mean, not literally anything, and I don't do surgery, for example,
Right.
or, you know.
But you can apply these tools in many
acting.
different fields.
So many.
Including acting. You're doing a great job. No, no, you can in many fields. I understand. The tools of analysis and to support aren't just necessarily related to operations. It could be any type of how to do things better regardless of what you're doing. That's right.
That's right.
So you studied operations research as a master's degree program, and then industrial engineers as a PhD program. So I have to ask this question: was there a PhD program for operations research, or was there something about industrial engineering that added a different twist that you wanted to actually get your PhD in that?
To be honest, I believe that in that department, every PhD said industrial engineering on it.
Oh,
and
I
my
see.
concentration was actually in decision analysis.
Okay, right.
So I didn't do a lot of the manufacturing side.
Right. Oh, I understand.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your dissertation then. What was it the focus on?
Well, so my dissertation was about the tools that business people use to evaluate investments and how that intersected with environmental issues. And so, because I had been working in environmental engineering, and a lot of tools for evaluating investments are sort of standard off-the-shelf net present value. You know, we use a particular parameters, discount rates, standard things, but that there can be some conflicts with things that happen in the environment.
You're talking about societal impacts, or those decisions aren't always taken into account in the tool.
Not just societal impacts, but things like when you do an environmental damage, a lot of times the impact of that is in the much more distant future. Whereas if you're making a decision about maybe a new product, your cost or your benefit is going to happen pretty soon. And so if you're making decisions where you might have a big liability, for example, maybe you're going to build a plant that could release chemicals, and you could have a big liability. It could be very large, but it could be in the extremely distant future.
Right.
Sometimes the rules of thumb or the more simple tools that we use to evaluate those don't really apply as well anymore.
Sure.
And so that's one example. There are a couple other things related to that in my dissertation.
So you bring in externalities that may not actually be part of that decision tool in your dissertation.
Yeah, that's one of the issues,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. So how did that go? You publish and well received, or?
I mean, when you're in academia, you write this big book that's a dissertation,
That's right.
and then you try to get people to read parts of it.
Yeah.
And so I will
At
say,
least the dissertation committee.
well, I will say that I did it so long ago that there was a hard copy, and I even got a royalty check for about $12 that somebody actually ordered this
that
dissertation.
Wow.
So and then $12 or maybe it was $16, and then
Well, that would
that was
against
it.
your student loan, you know.
Exactly. I mean, I
Or you went out
bought
for
a
a cup of
bottle of wine,
wine.
and then
That
that was
was
it.
great.
Yeah.
Well, that's
So
fantastic. So what did you do after you got your doctorate then?
I came straight here, and I've been here ever since.
Well, you came not straight to the Graduate School of Business and Public Policy in a way. You were hired by the Defense Resource Management Institute, DERMI. So how did we reach out to you, and why were you attracted to that interesting organization, I might say?
Well, DERMI does really interesting work. They teach resources management and a lot of management concepts to people from all over the world, and they do it all over the world. And so that was actually one of the appeals.
So you got a chance to travel quite a bit when you were there. Wonderful.
I did.
And what did you teach then?
Well, we taught, my focus would be a lot of the quantitative analytical tools, but DERMI teaches also a lot of economics, macroeconomics, microeconomics, and public sector management, public budgeting, and all these things in an integrated fashion. And when you go to Dermi, you go to
Right.
class all day long, you know,
So it's a
from 8
solid
in the
straight.
morning till, yeah, you
Right.
got to keep those folks interested, right? You
A
got
lot
to
of
keep them.
coffee, a lot of
lot
people working.
Yeah.
Well, now we've had, of course, the director on before, as well as several other Dermi faculty. But just to recall, describe the students. They come here for short courses, or you give short courses around the world. What are some more interesting places that you visited?
Oh, wow. So I have been to a fair amount of West Africa because we would teach courses in French there. So Guinea
you speak
and
French?
Senegal. Not that well, but well enough.
I'm a source of enjoyment when I try to speak French to these countries. But so, describe some of the students that you had.
Well, they tend to be much older than most students, and even the most MPS students. So
Right.
you'll have youngsters that are in their early 20s, young officers, but they'll be really ranging in age even up to 60, you know, even up
All
to
right.
very senior
Very
people.
senior people, sure. Flag officers, general officers sometimes. Right.
And they all have real jobs, right?
Yeah.
They all are doing a job that we hope is going to use the tools and the concepts that we teach, you know, the Monday after they finish the course.
Right, and that's where the conversation can be richer in the classroom because they come back with their own experiences and say, how would I apply this, or here's what the challenges I had in applying it, or here's why it works great, and that sort of thing. That must have been a dynamic and interesting environment.
It's really interesting, and to see how much they learn from each other. And we'll have students from countries like the United States or countries like Germany, where they have a really big, complicated defense organization and budget. And then we'll have students from places where literally the whole defense budget is less than the budget for like one small ship in the Navy.
Oh yeah.
And they'll have some of the same problems and concepts. And hearing them talk about the way they approach it and their different issues is always super interesting.
Now, you received a teaching award while you were at Dermi. Tell us what that was about.
Well, I'd like to believe that was partly by teaching effectively in the classroom,
Right.
by keeping those students engaged, and by developing new materials. But I think one of the main reasons is because while I was the leader of the curricular side, we substantially redeveloped the course for flag officers.
Oh,
so
right.
you bring flag officers in for 4 weeks.
That's something different entirely. That's education and entertainment. You have to combine the two.
you gotta take it up a notch.
Well,
to
those
keep
are
those
that's
folks
executive
interested.
education. No, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and broaden the scope. And so you redesigned the entire course. Now that's a senior course. We have flag officers from around the world attend that resident course at MPS. Is that also mobile as well, or do we just do that here?
We have a couple times done courses that were for more senior officers abroad. I remember doing one in South Africa over 10 years ago. But it's principally that one every year in Monterey. These flag officers and equivalent civilians, really great people. I mean, I know there's a lot of great people who don't make it to flag,
Right.
but there aren't a lot of people who make it to flag that aren't just
Engaged
really
and very
entristing and very,
enthusiastic
yeah.
and professional to the hilt. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, in reorganization at MPS I guess 2 years ago, the Defense Resource Management Institute started falling under the Graduate School of Business and Public Policy. You transitioned then as a faculty member to our Graduate School of Business and Public Policy. Why did you make that change, and what is life different for you now?
Well, I have 2 children, school-age children now.
So
And
traveling to
so
West Africa is a little harder.
I really enjoyed that,
Right.
but being away for 2-3 weeks at a time
Right.
regularly wasn't so fun anymore.
Right, no, understand. Challenge to the family.
Yeah.
So you transition, well, it's not really a transition because the Dermi faculty are part of the business faculty, but you transition to more resident courses here now. And so what do you teach?
I teach the mostly quantitative tools, so statistics, business modeling. I'm looking forward to teaching risk management soon. That's
great.
something that we taught in Dermi. I'm going to teach that in the business school.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So this is the more management science of the management side of the house. And what programs then within the business school do you teach these in?
Well, in the MBA programs,
Right.
and in particular in the operations and logistics management programs, the
Right.
supply chain and the material curricula.
So for the Navy officers, a lot of those are supply officers that come through.
Yeah.
Now, do we get other service logisticians as well?
We get a lot of Marines.
Okay.
And occasionally a couple Army. We don't have Air Force in our programs, but in the MBA program we do have some Air Force officers. Oh,
Right.
and the Coast Guard.
Oh, they come. That's great.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Now, do you get a chance to advise thesis as well, or?
I do get a chance to advise theses,
Yeah.
and that can be fun, digging into a topic that one hopes the students find interesting.
Right.
We had a meeting yesterday with the students in the Operations and Logistics Management curricula, asking them, well, what were the topics they wanted to look at? And a lot of them came and said, I saw this problem in my last organization, and I want to fix it.
Tackle that one, right. Now, are you active in research as well?
Yes.
So what are you doing for research? The answer to almost all our faculty is yes.
So I better be, right?
Right.
Yeah, so we do research, and it's almost always something that's of interest to somebody in the Pentagon, right?
Right.
So one thing I've done recently is built with colleagues a hurricane decision simulator. So it's an online game where you play the role of a Marine commander. In New Orleans, we have one for Miami as well, who sees a storm approaching and has to decide whether and when to evacuate their personnel out of
From a base and that sort of thing, based on indications that they have. Right.
based on the forecasts. And it's hard because those forecasts change and you just don't know where that hurricane is going to go.
Now we're going to have a Meat Talk faculty member here pretty soon. We're going to find out
good.
exactly.
Oh,
No, I'm
good.
kidding. No, that's great. So do you collect data on the simulation after they take it to see? Or is it more of a training feedback for the individual?
It's more training feedback for the individual, and they also can use it with groups. So it's common that they do tabletop exercises with the key staff a couple times a year, and so they use it for that. But we are developing now some experiments where we simplified it, made it a little bit less realistic and a little less rich, but so that we can see what do people do before they use the simulator, what do people do after they use the simulator, and is that different?
Well, if nothing else, by exposing them to those difficult decisions at times, you prepare them for the uncertain environment where they are actually faced with those decisions. And who are usually your subjects for this research?
Well, to be honest, in the experiments, we're going to use students at Iowa State. So our former colleague Cameron McKenzie is now at Iowa State, and he's going to run those experiments there.
Oh, great.
The people who use a simulator more normally tend to be Marine Forces Reserves,
right.
and sometimes the civilians that work there.
Well, are there broader there sounds like there's broader applications to this too. You're talking about critical risk decisions based on potential loss of life or property. So you could broaden this to quite a different field. Are you looking at that?
Not right now, but it really does apply. And so one is just decisions under risk. And the other thing that hasn't been well studied before is having that information change.
Right.
Right now it looks like the storm's going to do one thing,
and then suddenly it does another.
and suddenly it does another.
That's risk decisions in uncertainty.
And uncertainty over time.
Over time, right.
It's hard.
It is.
It's not easy.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show, and thanks for being at MPS. This has been a great story and a great interview. And one last question before you go, though. What have you enjoyed most about living in the Monterey area?
Well, I love the bike path and the public spaces.
Sure. You're a bicyclist, or just to be out there? Right, just to be out there next to the ocean is a fantastic thing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your contributions at MPS and making better students serve our country.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. Great to see you.
And thank you for joining us for this segment of the MPS Foundation YourTown television program. Join us again for future segments when we meet interesting faculty and students and what they're doing around your town.